about 2 minutes. So you can think more like, hypertrophy sets, you're doing like that 6 to 12 reps, circuit kind of training, repeated sprints. So not just like one max effort sprint, you do like a sprint, take like 30 seconds off, another sprint, interval, stuff like that. And this is also part of the step where lactate kind of comes into conversation. And so I put together a little thing on lactate because there's a lot of misinformation about it. Like one thing I hear a lot is like lactate or lactic acid causes like muscle soreness and burning sensation. That is not true. It has to do with all these little hydrogen ions and everything else involved. So like you can see here, you're creating hydrogen ions, and that is part of the reason for muscle fatigue and all of that. We'll get into that in a minute. But that's glycolysis. I don't want to go too deep unless you guys want to on that. Any questions on glycolysis? I find the main themes of this is it's your intermediate level energy system, and it's not very energy efficient in terms of producing energy, but it makes the things that will come later to produce your energy. So this is why the lactate's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so lactate production in general is like, where does lactate come from? So there's the glycolysis, right? Then we have that pyruvate. So in order for this to keep going, we need oxygen. We'll get to that a little bit later. So let's just say there's not a lot of oxygen. It's a high intense thing where you can just think like a sprint. You don't have a lot of time to breathe because it's one sprint. So, and the more you do that, the more you get tired, your body's going to run low on oxygen in the sense it's used up all the oxygen it can, and now you're getting this backlog of products. I'll clarify that later. Where basically now your body has to take this pyruvate and turn it into lactate. And then that is a molecule that people say is associated with like muscle soreness, all of that. So it is actually not the cause. There's a cycle. Lactate is actually can be used for more energy. It can be sent to your liver to create more glucose. Okay, so we'll cover that in a second. But like I said, it's a fuel source. It can be recycled back into the system, and in fact, the burning sensation is actually mainly due to the accumulation of hydrogen ions. And in other words, like pH, that's a measure of hydrogen ions. So the more hydrogen ions you create, the lower your pH, the more acidic. So that's kind of where that burning sensation can be associated with. So again, where do those hydrogens come from? You can see right there. So every time you break sugar down, you're creating two hydrogens. And you're burning a lot of sugar when you're trying to do stuff. So you keep creating hydrogens, but you also keep creating lactate. So the lactate is a process called polycycle, where basically lactate gets taken out of your muscle, and then it gets sent in your blood all the way to your liver, and then your liver turns it back to glucose, and then it sends it back to your muscle. So in that process, you're also creating more hydrogen ions. But the benefit of the lactate is getting rid of glucose to get more energy. So lactate is actually good in that sense. It's the hydrogen ions that are associated with the production of lactate that are the bad. So I just wanted to add that in there just to kind of clear that one, because that's a very common one. A lot of people say is that lactic acid is bad. So that's that. Any questions on that?
Is pyruvate the same thing in terms of like creatine and how we use creatine from internal source and also external source that we take?
Well, they're two independent molecules, so they're different things. Creatine and pyruvate are different.
Yeah.
The creatine is used to like these two ATP that come out. So the product of glycolysis is 2 ATP and 2 pyruvate. So if those 2 ATP are used for energy, the creatine can come in and restore the phosphate on the ATP and make it ATP. Does that make sense like that?
Yeah. No, I get it. What I've seen is like there's creatine supplements now.
Yeah.
We don't have enough internally to use, or we just deplete.
Yeah.
And that's what helps us maintain ATP, right?
Exactly. So that's the benefit of one of the benefits of creatine supplements.
What I've seen lately is now there's a pyruvate supplement as well.
Okay, yeah. I have seen that before. I haven't read any articles on it, like if it actually works or not. I have seen the pyruvate things, but it's like a similar idea as getting creatine in there just to give you more energy. The more pyruvate you have, the thought is you'll be able to make more ATP, but that's why I feel like I don't know if that will work in essence, because at the end of the day, the next things to come are the electron transport chain and all that. You need the oxygen there to even get the pyruvate into the mitochondria. So you might just be putting more fuel on the fire. like Dr. Potter would show us this video from, but basically the concept is it's like a conveyor belt. And the pyruvates are the things going down the conveyor belt, and you have to package. It's like a whole black and white group, and she's yeah, I love Lucy. Yeah, she's like trying to take all the sushi or whatever off, and then she's like send another, and then there's even more coming. So that's like the supplement. You put too much, there's only so many enzymes and so many workers to put that pyruvate into the cycle. So then she starts putting them in her hat and starts eating them, and then it just overflows the system. So that's why I don't know if pyruvate just intuitively in our head would work.
Yeah.
You still need the oxygen to convert it.
Yeah, if you don't have it's pointless to have B.
Exactly, exactly. Because this is kind of the term for it's rate limiting step. Like glycolysis is kind of the dividing point between aerobic and anaerobic. So in order to even use the pyruvate, you need to be in an aerobic state. So if you're doing anaerobic things, you're probably not even going to get to use that pyruvate anyways, per se.
Hey, so I probably should have told you this, but you're on YouTube Live, so if I get questions, I'm just going to ask you, because people are responding.
That's fine. So this kind of shows those points a little bit. So this is kind of like lactate accumulating. So basically, with work intensity, when it's pretty low, and you're just doing like light intensity things, your body's not really making a lot of lactate. In other words, it's clearing that pyruvate, it's going in, and you're using it and breaking it down. But once things get too intense, your body starts to accumulate some lactate. And that's where you start to transition between like the electron transport chain, those other two things, Krebs cycle, into like the fluid glycolysis and the phosphagen system, and the Cori cycle. You're just trying to use all that lactate. And then once you get too high, you go too intense or work too long, then you hit kind of that anaerobic threshold, or also lactate threshold, and that's when you really start fatiguing. Your body starts burning out, your breathing becomes more labored, you're starting to get tired, your performance goes down, you're later in your workout, or you're later in your set, weights are heavy, weights are hard. So this is the point where like, you've already built up so much lactate that you can't even send that pyruvate anywhere else, so pyruvate just getting converted into more lactate. So maybe in that sense, the pyruvate supplement might help, but then it's going to be limited by the liver's ability to convert it back into sugar. So that's why I don't know, but that's not much. But that kind of clears that up. So there's kind of two threshold points. There's like pure aerobic stuff, pure anaerobic stuff, and then somewhere in the middle. So like that first line is showing when just the aerobic threshold. Just the intensity that things start to get a little bit too hard for your aerobic systems to do all the work. And now you start to shift to more anaerobic. And then once things get really hard or the duration gets really long, like you can even take the end of a marathon if you wanted to, when they can barely run at the end. That's when there's so much lactate in their blood that it just can't be cleared fast enough, and then that's when you start fatiguing, your performance goes down. So as well, like this is that number can be adjusted. You can become more tolerant to lactate. You can clear it faster, and that's kind of the indicator of performance there. So like what we did, our lab, we worked with like Kings, we went out and did lactate testing where you put them on a bike, and it's like a ramp cycle where they just increasing intensities. Keep measuring their blood as the intensity increases, and you make that graph. And then you train them, and then you do that test again, and then you can see did that go up. And that's the goal, is we want that threshold to go higher so they can perform longer without fatigue. So that's kind of the importance and implication of lactate.
That's cool.
So now let's get into the aerobic system. So this system is kind of, so you have that glycolysis cycle, which is just in like the cytoplasm of your cell, and then once you make those pyruvates then get sent into your mitochondria, and then they get chopped up and turned into basically hydrogen ions, or NADH and FADH. Those big four things. You don't need to worry too much about those, obviously. And then those go to the electron transport chain, and then those is where you make your ATP. This is where you make a lot of ATP. I want to say for every 2 pyruvates on my head, I think it's like 32 ATP. So that's the difference between like glycolysis. You make 2, this you make 32. So you get a lot more energy out of this, so that's why you're able to do things like this, aerobic things forever. You're able to just walk all day long. You're always going to have energy. And obviously it's the things that last longer than 2 minutes. So steady state cardio, longer intervals, active recovery. And this is the process that's kind of the base for everything else. So like we just went over, if you can't use this system well, you're going to accumulate pyruvates, and then they're going to get sent to lactate. And then you're going to fatigue. So if you can make this system better, you can do longer state cardio, you can build up your ability to go longer. You're gonna also get better at shorter duration things as well, because you're gonna be more aerobic. You're gonna be able to use oxygen better, which means you're gonna be able to bring in more pyruvate, which means you're gonna be able to use glycolysis better. So that's kind of how everything is individualized, and then the next one is now kind of an overview of everything. But again, am I going too fast?
No.
It's a lot of words.
No, it's like Brian said, it's a lot of refreshers, so I'm just like, you know, like I love hearing it. But coaching tip builds the base for all the other systems. Can you, can you build on that one a little bit?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was going over at the end, is like, the aerobic system is kind of the foundation for everything. One, we're aerobic creatures. So the more, the aerobic training, what it does in terms of building the base is it helps you build more mitochondria, and it helps you build more capillaries, which are the things where the oxygen change actually happens between your blood and your muscle. So the more you can integrate some aerobic throughout the week, the more mitochondria you're going to get, the better you're going to be able to send blood to muscle, blood to muscle, and then oxygen to the muscle, inevitably. And then that is going to allow you to do higher intensity things for a little bit longer, because you're going to be able to accumulate more pyruvate without it going to lactate.
Yes.
Is that where we say like nitrates and stuff like that, like beetroot?
Yeah, beetroot. So beetroot, where beetroot and nitrates come into play, is they help with vasodilation. So they actually help your blood vessels expand a little bit more to get more blood and oxygen there. So that is kind of part of the process. But at the end of the day, you still need the mitochondria, more mitochondria to use if you're getting more oxygen, more blood. But it'll help. It'll contribute to that process. So beetroot and the nitrogen and even vasodilation. Trying to think of the exact same. So there's a supplement I took that was a vasodilator. And that's kind of the idea behind those. And then that's why if you're going to take those, they recommend it for endurance training, because it's going to open up your blood vessels. You're going to get blood there faster, so you're going to be able to run longer. And then that will then, over time, build more mitochondria.
Does your system adapt to building more? So, you look at like creatine as a supplement, you do creatine with what you have internally, right? So the more you build, the more you start producing, right? So would, in a sense, vasodilators and nitrates that would help that essentially open up your loads and your body would get used to it. Naturally, your body would start to open it up more? Or
I would need to double check that for sure. My intuitive answer would be yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if by adaptation you mean if I stop let's say I take it for 3 months, if I stop taking it, will that effect stay forever? I don't think so. Unless you continue to train it. Like if you stop the supplement and stop the training, your body adapts to what you do. So it'll resort back.
Yeah.
But if you use it as like a short-term thing to help just build that endurance, then once your body and your blood vessels just naturally contract and dilate faster, that's why we don't need it anymore. But you have to keep the training up to continue to benefit from it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there's a big picture. So it's like all those 3 systems in like one picture. It's kind of blurry. So basically, you have the phosphagen system at the top. That creates a little ATP. And then when you need more ATP, like you're not just doing one jump, you're doing some strength sets or you're lifting weights, now you start using some glycolysis. And then that glycolysis will make some pyruvate. As long as it doesn't get too hard and too intense, that pyruvate can go to your mitochondria and then get churned around, turn down the electron transfer chain, and more ATP. This is also where fats come in. So this is why aerobic oxidative stuff is both burning sugar and fat. So fat also enters the Krebs cycle there, so that's why as well, if you're not doing aerobic stuff, you're not going to be utilizing fat as your main energy source, but I say that sparingly because I also want to give the impression that if you don't do aerobic, that means you can't burn fat. That's where calories come in. So you want to, basically, if you're doing all aerobic stuff, you're going to oxidize fat, you're going to use fat quickly, but your body's also going to store fat more quickly in that sense. So when you eat, your body's going to store that fat because it knows you're using it. So that's kind of why this isn't quite the conversation around burning fat. It's more just a conversation around where does fat come in terms energy, and that's why long distance stuff you're going to be able to go forever, is because compared to sugar, fat creates even more of those hydrogen ions in that little Krebs cycle we looked, those NAD, FAD. More of those are made from fat, so that's why aerobic as well. You can just do stuff all day long in aerobic because your body's really efficient with it. It's when you're up there, you're less efficient. So like that's where you think like strength training. That's where you think like cardio, basically walking, like. And then if you have you guys ever seen like fast, like they're on the side there? I've seen these. They're all kind of used interchangeably. See like fast glycolysis, slow glycolysis, aerobic glycolysis, anaerobic glycolysis. In general, what I think about it is below the line's aerobic, meaning it needs oxygen because the oxygen has to go to that ETC. That's why it's oxidative. That's why it's aerobic. And then when your body can't bring in any more oxygen, you've used up as much as you can. Then you go anaerobic, or you're doing metabolic systems that don't require oxygen. So that's the easiest way to think about it. Those systems don't require oxygen, that's why they're anaerobic. These systems require oxygen, that's why they're aerobic. And then they're slower because there's more steps, that's faster, but faster doesn't mean better because it doesn't produce a lot of ATP, slow does. That's kind of the whole picture. I think we're almost done with the science. So the other thing too is like all of them are working at the same time. So it's not like you're only using one. You're using all at one time. It's just which one is the predominant one, which one are you using mostly. So this is that kind of capacity. You can think of it as in terms of duration. You can also think of it in terms of power output or intensity. So like high effort things that are very short and brief. You can think even outside of jumping more sports, you could think like throwing a baseball, hitting a golf ball, kicking a soccer ball. That's going to be that far lift system. And then creatine phosphate, that CP, creatine phosphate can come in and help restore that ATP, but that's also why you need to rest if you want to use that full ATP system. Then you have that anaerobic glycolysis, like we were just going over. It's just, you're using glycolysis and it's going to lactate. So it's not going down into that, below that line on that last picture. So that's then that aerobic glycolysis. It's not quite intense enough to where you can send that pyruvate down. And that goes back to this picture. Let's go back real quick. This picture. So there's like this, that aerobic glycolysis is like right here, and then anaerobic is like right there. So you're kind of using both. You haven't accumulated enough lactate or pyruvates yet to send it to lactate. That's why it hasn't crossed the threshold. So that's kind of where those two little charts go. And then you have the aerobic glycolysis. It's just, that's when the fat enters the cycle. That one is purely aerobic because it can't use glycolysis at all because it's fat. So that's like your long duration stuff, your marathon running, your just cleaning around the house, stuff like that. Sitting here doing this, you're in this system. And then as we start moving, we're in that system, and then when we start jumping, running, lifting, we're over there. So lifting, circuit training, max classes maybe, and then like going for a walk. So those are kind of the three categories. So this is now like examples. So you can see like all systems are basically on at all times. It's just the intensity, duration, kind of determine which one you use more. So like short distance swims, high intensity movements where you're having to like sprint really hard, tackle somebody, or gymnastics you have to be explosive, jumping in volleyball, swinging, throwing in baseball. Those are all predominantly like phosphagen and glycolysis. So these are more anaerobic sports. So that goes back to that very first slide. I like there's a continuum of like aerobic sports, anaerobic sports, and like mixed sports. Most sports are obviously mixed. So you can think like basically this is all like kind of mixed right in here. And these are most of the sports people do and play with. And then there's like more track and field stuff where you're doing like short distance sprints. Those people need power. So this is also why like sprinters and runners are not the same. Like their training is different. If you look at a sprinter, they're very muscular. They're very big and strong and powerful because they need this system. So they actually train more like a weightlifter, powerlifter in the gym. Whereas a runner, they're a lot leaner, and it's because they're using mostly aerobics. So their training in the gym is less about getting as strong and building muscle. It's more about building muscular endurance. There's just a lot higher rep stuff in the gym. They're doing 15 plus reps, light weights, these guys are doing essentially powerlifts because they need to be, every step needs to be super strong and powerful and explosive. And then all the other sports kind of fill in the middle, or anything else is kind of in between where they need a little bit of everything. So that's kind of where for athletes, programming can be a little interesting because then it comes down to like timing things. So you don't necessarily want to be doing like anaerobic stuff with an aerobic athlete during their main stuff, vice versa for them. And then for the intermediates, people in between, like with baseball, what I have to do with them, is put it in like context, is in their off season, when they finish their sport, when they're like right now, they should be aerobic, building that aerobic fitness, that ability to build more mitochondria, because you're going to need that to be really good here. And then as they get closer to their season, around like Christmas time, that's when we start doing sprints. So then that way we can build that anaerobic system closer to when they need it, because if you're doing like sprints year round, you're just going to gas yourself out, and you're probably not putting in full effort every single time. So for like non-athletes, the way to look at it is it would depend on their goal, what they're trying to do. They don't have like a big running goal, like they're not trying to compete in any like triathlons or anything like that. They're just like, I just want to get healthy to lose weight. I would just start with aerobic, just keep them aerobic. There's some people who are like, I just want like the long distance stuff, so that's where like high intensity intervals can help. And then you just kind of want to do a little bit of both, and then you could either start them aerobic, do an aerobic kind of based program, then go anaerobic in terms of like the conditioning, and then kind of do both at the same time. So that's, for them, it's a little bit more aerobic would probably be better starting, especially if they haven't been in the gym while high intensity stuff, they just might not like feeling like that heart rate spiking and all that. So we'll get into that a little more. So there's like programming implications now. So like I said, like 1RM stuff, it could be a deadlift, any 1RM. Has to be your oxygen system. So that's kind of why you want to sit down for 5 minutes to recover, and that's what the oxidative system is helping. So that's also why I come back to your base question. This is why oxidative is a base. You're also going to be able to recover faster from high intense things. So that's also why you want to have that aerobic base, because it's going to improve your recovery time. So you might not need the full 5 minutes to get back to max performance. You might only need 2. And then like 400-meter sprints, that's a quarter mile. That's going to be mostly glycolysis, and then like the secondary system, that'll help you with like maybe in that last little bit of that first start you want to get going. That's that ATP kind of helping you off the blocks, and then it's kind of like glycolysis the rest of the way. And obviously marathons, 26 miles or whatever it is, that's basically all oxidative. Because if you try and go any faster than like your race pace, you're going to burn out because you're going to use all that energy. You went too fast, you're not going to be able to use the oxidative stuff. So you're just going to be walking the rest of the way until you can recover enough to do that. Yeah, in general, like power strength, that's anaerobic, ATP, phosphagen, and glycolysis, and then endurance, high rep stuff, aerobic activities, oxygen. A little bit more, so now let's get like work rest ratios. So, like we were saying, so the duration of the exercise, let's start with phosphagen, phosphocreatine. 0 to 10 seconds. So that's why you're going to need a longer rest ratio. It's very short because you want to clear that up. So like work rest, I've seen it as high as 1 to 50. But that again, it depends on what you're doing. So like, if I want my athlete to improve, my client to improve their sprint time, we're going to do 1 max effort sprint. And then if that sprint takes 5 seconds, we're going to sit there for at least another, that's why I'm saying like 1 to 6, it depends what you're doing. I try to multiply it by 20. So we'd be sitting there for another, 2.5, 3 minutes before we do another sprint. And that's if the goal is to improve the sprint time. Then if you just want to work on kind of their sprint endurance, their ability to do sprint after sprint, that's where you shorten the time down to maybe like 1 sprint every 30-second sprint, and then take 90 seconds off, another 30-second sprint. So like I've seen like on treadmills or like Stairmasters, people go like 30 seconds hard on one level, and then drop it down, and then do 90 seconds easy. 30 seconds hard, 90 seconds easy. That's kind of that system right there. That's what you're training. Versus just keeping it on the low on the Stairmaster, just going the whole time. So like that's kind of the difference between work rest ratios. You're actually targeting each energy system, and that's where the term like metabolic conditioning comes there. Metcons, you're trying to, marathon based on the work rest ratio determines the energy system you're training. So that's kind of what those mean. And you can see like kind of the intensity of exercise, like I said, phosphagens, like that's like max effort. So you're really only doing that like if you're testing somebody's max strength, or they're doing like a maximum effort sprint, maximum effort jump. Otherwise, most of the time in the gym here, we're in that middle column, where we're doing, you know, supersets or whatever, we're doing triceps, and we're working for anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then we take like 90 seconds to 3 minutes off before we begin. And then when we're doing like stretching at the end, or maybe a light cardio warm-up in the beginning, where you're doing your walk on Sundays, that's system up, right? So most of the time we're there. And that's also now putting it all together, and just to kind of repeat some of the same things about Mark said. Is once again like you're doing the gym stuff, the anaerobic stuff in the middle, like 3 to 4 days a week ideally, and then you do the aerobic stuff on the off days, like another 2 to 3 days a week. So I think the average recommendation is like 150 minutes a week of aerobic. So if you get 150 minutes a week in of this stuff, that'll help you with that stuff. And then doing that stuff will improve your ability to perform on testing days for the first column. So that's kind of the 3 columns, the simplest way. Questions?
No.
Comments? Sprints, any singles, repeats, sleds? Okay. So I guess kind of like the key takeaways, and then I just have a couple pictures at the end that kind of just show more applications if you want to go into them. But basically, like common mistakes in terms of energy or metabolic conditioning is just like training the wrong energy system, and that usually just comes with just either not working hard enough, like not pushing yourself hard enough, or not taking enough rest based on the system you're trying to target. So, like if you're trying to improve your sprint speed, some of my youth athletes get into this habit where we want to sprint and they just want to get done with sprints faster. It's like, can we just go again? And I'm like, no, we gotta wait for another 90 seconds because we're trying to rest. I'm trying to improve your sprint speed. And then, like I said, you know, for the endurance athlete, you know, marathon runner, cross-country runner, higher intensity plays a role because it'll build their tolerance to higher intensity stuff, especially as they start fatigue, but it shouldn't be the predominant thing they're doing. And then vice versa for like strength power athletes, we went over that several times, but you need that aerobic base because that'll help your ability to recover from those high intense things, and then vice versa, the high intense things will help improve your tolerance of the long duration things. So like one way to think about it is like a marathon runner, as they get later and later into their workout, they start fatiguing. But as an aerobic athlete, they never do high fatiguing things. So they might not have a tolerance to that feeling of being completely winded, completely tired, your muscles are tired. So that's where like using some higher intensity stuff where people are doing more endurance-based goals can help them because it improves their like psychological and physical tolerance to even endurance and long duration things. And then key takeaways is, you know, all 3 systems, they work together. Like we went over, each one just kind of turns on more at a different point. And yeah, rest and recovery are crucial based on what you're trying to do. So then I have a couple charts that are just a little bit more in depth on everything. So this would be like, you know, based on the duration of the exercise, the type of strength training you're trying to focus on, how long the work should be, and then you just use those work rest ratios, multiply it, and then you can figure out what you're trying to do. So you can do like alactic, that's just phosphagen. Lactic, that's glycolysis, and then oxygen dependent, that's the aerobic system or electron transport chain. And then if you picture that chart, and we have overlaid that chart, it's kind of flipped right now, but in the beginning, you know, as you start getting closer to that first line on that first chart, that's your capacity, is how long does it take you to get to that first line. And then your ability to withstand crossing that first line is like your power. So like that's like your VO2 max, if you're familiar with VO2. And then say once you cross that line, you go a little bit higher, your ability before you hit that second line, that's your capacity of being able to exercise and lactate your blood before it accumulates so much that you really start fatiguing. And then that's where that system takes in. So that's basically training with athletes, with normal people, cardio. You're trying to push those lines out longer. You're trying to withstand being able to endure longer. So that is where actually cardio, sprints, running, conditioning can help weightlifting. And that's one thing I'm not good about. And I'm just saying this out loud to the Because it will help me do the thing I like to do most, which is lift weights. So, yeah, so that's kind of how they all tie together in terms of the gym and cardio. And then there's one more picture. This just kind of shows it in a different way, but with like the intensity zones. Have you ever heard like the cardio zone, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3? This is kind of flipped though, the way this chart did it. Because like zone 1 in like the normal cardio zones is supposed to be just like recovery, aerobic. It's less than 50% heart rate. So you're just kind of walking. So the zones aren't super specific to that. It's flipped. But you can see now you have your number of reps. So if you're doing like really high rep stuff, 20, 25 reps, you're training some aerobic stuff, muscular endurance. And then once reps start shortening down, that's when you're in more lactic systems or phosphagen systems. And then there's where rest ratios are about like 1 to 100. That would make sense if you're doing like a 1 second bout, you're going to want 100 seconds of rest, not 6 seconds like the last one was ratio. And then you can see the percentage intensity. Steady state, yeah. That's kind of that one whole picture, but it's just another graph.
Alec, you love your graphs.
Yeah.
Explain
Well,
this graph.
It helps visualize it. It's 'cause it's
No,
a
it's
lot
true.
of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
No, explain this graph.
Okay. So basically, this graph, bottom is time, how long the effort is, and then this is now maximum rate of energy production because they give power output. They give this heart rate max. They're all numbers to tell you the same story, which is what energy system you're doing, and then as you know, the higher that can get, the better your performance gets. So that's kind of what training is it's to make these charts bigger so your overall performance gets a bit better. But overall performance, like I don't want you thinking because it's down there, it means like if you're only doing aerobic stuff, you don't have a high overall performance. It's more showing that like the power output or the intensity, that's kind of what that's saying. So the first is basically like in the first 2 seconds, if you're doing something for 2 seconds, like we talked about a jump, quick jump, that's all ATP. It's stored ATP in your blood, it's sitting there. And then you burn that, so now when that's gone, now you need more ATP, so that then it's going to go to creatine. And then the creatine is going to come in and put more phosphates on the ATP to make more ATP. Then once you have phosphocreatine, then your glycolysis is going to turn on. You're going to start using more glucose in the pyruvate. And then as long as you if the duration keeps going, it implies you're not going super hard. So that's kind of why this levels off here. If you're not going super hard, you're able to keep going. So your body's able to send those pyruvates down, and you're not accumulating the lactate. But if you go too high, then you're too intense. Your body's going to turn that pyruvate into lactate, and you're going to stay here. So this is like I said, that's why up to a minute. Most gym stuff we're here, and then outside the gym, our cardio days.
Got it. Love it.
Now we have time for questions.
Questions?
Most clients that say like you get a new client, you would want to start them in an aerobic phase, right? Of type training for
Yeah, for most, especially if they're unaccustomed or detrained, they haven't done it in a while. You always want to start with just, at least for the conditioning, aerobic base, but same thing with the sets and reps. You want to be in that higher rep scheme. I usually would do like, outside of like main lifts, heavy hard compound movements, you're looking like 12 to 15 plus reps. Like on their accessory stuff. Start them there, do that for, about a month, 4 to 6 weeks. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks to build that system. Yeah, so like 4 to 6 weeks. Then after 4 to 6 weeks, they've developed at least enough aerobic base and tolerance to lifting and the movements to now start going heavier, and now they're kind of in that hypertrophy range. And maybe basic strength, where now you're like occupying like 6 to 12 reps. And then you do that for another 4 to 6 weeks.
6 to 12 will still be aerobic, or
It'll be that first graph where it's like aerobic, anaerobic, it's kind of between the both.
gotcha.
So you'll be able to, once you get below the 6 reps, that's when you're basically purely anaerobic, and that's why that comes last. And why you want to start aerobic, 12 to 15 plus reps, at least on assistance movements. Main lifts, I'd probably keep honestly between 6 to 10 the whole time, just because those compounds, if they're doing heavy compound stuff, those compound movements. 4 to 6 weeks of that. then you go to like hypertrophy ranges where it's like 6 to 12 reps, do that for 4 to 6 weeks, and then the last month, now you're in like 1 to 6 rep range, various on the main lifts. And then you can, keep in your workout design, you could do 6 to 10 on main lift, 8 to 12 on assistance, and then 12 to 15 plus on accessory, and then make that most of the volume. And then stage 2, reduce volume there, add more of the 8 to 12 stuff, the assistance stuff, keep the strength at 6 to 10, and then that last month, drop the strength stuff, your main lift down to 1 to 6, and then take volume off on these last 2, and then maybe do a little bit of sprints at the end. So like that's how I kind of like, and then you can just think of it as 3 different sections, block 1, block 2, block 3, across 3 months, and you have main lift, 6 to 10, hypertrophy, 6 to 12, or 8 to 12, endurance, 12 to 15, more volume here, and then the next month, take volume off here, add it here, keep that the same, the last month, take the volume off here, add it here, and then keep those the same, and then times up to reduce the sprints at the end, or at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. If you could send out like an example of that, of like what it would look like, not obviously detailed as far as the lifts, but like how that would look, right?
Wasn't it, didn't you kind of send over something like that for your periodization?
Yeah.
Like your,
We're going over periodization on what week?
I think 4.
Okay, so what'd you say we'll say for
Yeah. I think I had something. So like that's kind of the structure I was just kind of going over. Like what's really like your warm up? If I probably would skip this in the first phase. And this is maybe a little more athlete specific. Speed, power. It doesn't need to be sprint jump. You could be doing like just during the aerobic stage of the first month. If there's somebody who wants to get Olympic lifts, this is where you're just doing like bar work. You're just doing technique work with the ball, and that can fill the speed, power stuff. And then the strength, that's your main lift. You can make already bigger. So you can take 6 to 10 during phase 1. This could be 8 to 12 phase 1. And then this would be like your 12 to 15 plus, right? And then phase 2, let's drop this down, let's say 5 to 8, okay? And then because we're going a little bit heavier, and then this, we can drop down to, 6 to 10. And then this, we can keep, 10 to 15. And then you're just kind of dropping reps each phase, so this is like every month. And then this last one now, you're gonna have like 1 to 6 range. This one I might, keep somewhere around 6 to 8. And then this I might just make it like 10 to 12. And then that's kind of how you use the sets. But you can, and then this is also called, I was gonna get into this, it's called like concurrent periodization, where you're training all qualities in the same workout or in the same training stage for the same month. You can do it a different day, you can have a strength day, or you can do it all in one workout.
What'd you say what would you call it? Do it all at the same time?
It's called concurrent periodization. So you're concurrently training all the same things. You're training, rather than having like an endurance month, a hypertrophy month, a strength month, you can do all of them at once in one workout or in 1 week, where like Monday's strength, Wednesday's hypertrophy, Friday's endurance. And that's when I use, that's what I use with Nick. Because Nick needs a little bit of everything, but his body's also not really in a place to take strength training all the time. So we kind of have like one harder day to keep his strength up, then we have like one muscle building day, and then we have like an endurance, mobility, movement day. So like those like are our 3 days that I do with him. And then like youth athletes who are new to training, they can do all qualities every single day, 3 days a week. So this is what I would do every day for the youth athlete. And then for an adult client, at the end of the day, that the general answer is well, it depends. Depending on their goals, like if they don't have anything specific coming up, nothing big, then I'll probably start them off like this, see how they tolerate it, and then if they're like, I want to do more strength stuff, then I might incorporate like 2 strength days, and then 2 like hypertrophy endurance days, or 1 hypertrophy endurance day.
I think to that point, I mean you're the captain of the program, right? So you know whether they're ready to kind of transition to full strength.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll get clients like I'm done with the volume stuff. I'm like, but you haven't quite met those needs yet, so let's do 2 more weeks, prove that you can do it, then we can move you more into strength.
And at the end of the day too, you can just, like you're saying, you can see and watch. And as long as numbers are going up, they're getting stronger, they're feeling more better, you don't even necessarily need to change anything. Like, don't change anything until they plateau realistically, because then you're just kind of making your job harder, because then you have to constantly change stuff, you're constantly have to coach new stuff. It's like, as long as it's working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people, like, even if you just had a 12-week program where it was a month of this, a month of that, a month of that, and they got great results, just use that same program. Or maybe just try it slightly heavier, add 5 pounds, even in that endurance cycle, or in the beginning, just have them do the same exercise, but just 5 pounds more than me, and then go that way. It'll be a lot easier. But we'll get back to all that. There's all different types of models. Same with training loss. This is where, like, you could do different stuff each day. So you have a strength day, a hypertrophy day, and a power day. And then they change it each week. You go up in weight, down in reps, down in volume, and then you test and deload the rest of the week. So like that's where you kind of separate the qualities instead of the one training day across one training week. So that's that. Yeah. And then that was what I was getting to, all different types of periodization. So this is what I was saying. It's like, weeks. The first month you can do hypertrophy stuff, where you're doing higher reps, then you go more strength stuff, and then power development and lower reps. High level model. So like this would be a good one that will connect with the energy system. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, those are strength days. And that's where you use like the anaerobic systems. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, that's where you're doing like your cardio, your skill work, your mobility. That's your low intensity days. And then that allows your body to adequately recover to always perform well on the high days. And once again, why the aerobic is a base for the anaerobic, because it helps you recover, both in terms of what you're doing, but also the energy system itself.
That's week 4, right?
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, well, we can just go over that for that way. Won't take way too much of the slides.
Cool.
Are you gonna send those out to us, Alec?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then anyone who wants to jump into the other slides on the outline, or if you still don't feel comfortable, you want to talk about some things.
Just type your name and we'll share.
Okay.
Wow.